Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. This Thanksgiving, surely you're going to be around someone who is going to gloat about the great Democrat victory in the 2020 election. Today's special is intended to arm you with the facts so you can tell that gloater about the red wave of 2020. Let's put the presidential race aside for a couple minutes here, although there's plenty to celebrate there as well. Record turnout for Republicans, even after 4 years of being called Hitler and a white supremacist and all that. Trump got an amazing share of the Black, Hispanic, Asian, Muslim, gay vote. But we're going to put the presidential race aside completely and talk about the amazing Republican victories on all of the down ballot races this year. Let's start with congressional races. So Democrats started with 235 congressional seats. All right, 235. The group 538, they predicted that the Democrats would win 239. The economists' model predicted the Dems would win 244, so they would gain 9 seats. In the end, they only won 222. They lost 13 seats, right? The Democrats were supposed to flip Republican seats. The Democrats were supposed to increase their congressional majority. And instead, it was the Republicans who flipped seats, particularly in Florida and California, which we'll talk about coming up. Nancy Pelosi now has the smallest congressional majority since 1919. So right now, it's 222 Dems, 205 Republicans, and 8 seats are still remaining to be called. The Democrats flipped 3 Republican seats, but the Republicans flipped 11. So here's the noteworthy thing about the congressional races. So there's 5 different categories. Going into it, there's 5 different categories. You had the very safe Democrat seats and the very safe Republican seats. No problem, right? Then you had, right in the middle, you had the toss-ups. And on each side, you had likely Republican and likely Democrat. Make sense? Of the 26 races, the 26 districts that Republicans were expected to win narrowly, right? So they're maybe a little bit ahead. Of those 26, Republicans won all of them, and by huge margins. Of those 26, the smallest margin was a Republican win by 6, and the largest was 23. What kind of district is that? Where they're going into it, they're like, well, I don't know. The Republican will probably win, but it's going to be close, and they won by 23 points. And the average victory for all those 26 Republican wins was in double digits. The races that the Democrats were narrowly leading, like we think the Democrats are going to pull it out, but it's going to be close. There were 36 of those. The Democrats lost 7 of them. And 5 of them were blue seats that flipped red. And the average margin of victory for those Democratic races were like 1-2%. That's it. So they barely won them. So the Republican seats, the races that were like slightly Republican, Republicans crushed them. And in the races that were likely Democrat, well, Republicans won a lot of them. And the Democrats who did win, they barely won. And then that middle column, the toss-up districts, there were 27 toss-ups. So we're going into election night, we're like, oh, I don't know, it's tied. Republicans won all of them. Every single one. There were 27 toss-ups. Republicans won 27 of them. And 6 of them were blue seats that the Republicans flipped. And the average margin of victory in those races was 5%. So they didn't just squeak them out. They won by a lot. 5 points is a lot. Those are crushing wins in the House. Crushing wins, like not even close. Hence that conference call among Democrats a couple days after the election where they're cursing at each other and freaking out. They don't know what they're going to do next. So we'll talk about that coming up a little more with our amazing guests. U.S. Senate. Democrats were planning on flipping 7 Republican Senate races. 7. They only got 2. And a Republican flipped Alabama and almost flipped Michigan. So we're going to know everything there is to know about Georgia's Senate race in the next few weeks. Everyone's going to be talking about it nonstop. It's going to be excruciating. So we'll finish that up. But the Democrats were supposed to gain 7 seats and only ended up netting 1. And the Democrats were crushed in those races. The Democrat raised $109 million, record by far, to try to beat Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. $109 million. And Graham won by 10 points. The Democrats spent $90 million to try and take down Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. $90 million. And McConnell won by 19 points. What in the world were the Democrats thinking? So that's the Senate. And Republicans are going to hold the Senate. Even if they lost both the Georgia races, you still have Joe Manchin in West Virginia, who's a Democrat, but really a Republican. So anyway, state legislatures. I'd argue that this is maybe the most important of them all, especially this year. This is a census year. So the state legislatures are in charge of redrawing the congressional districts for the next elections. When the Democrats do it, it's called redistricting. When the Republicans do it, it's evil gerrymandering. But Republicans hold the state legislatures. So that's going to hurt Democrats in the 2022 election and then moving forward, of course. So the Democrats were hoping to flip, this is unbelievable, 10 state legislatures. And in the end, they lost all of them. And the Republicans flipped New Hampshire. So Republicans turned New Hampshire into a red state on the state legislature side. So the Democrats spent $88 million to try to win these state legislature seats, and the Republicans spent 60. So $88 million to $60 million. And the Democrats lost all of them, and then some. The president of the Republican Party's state committee guy, he said, we beat the hell out of them, and they have nothing to show for it. There's no other way, and the Democrats know that too, and the media knows it too. They're just not telling you, of course. So Republicans now control 29 state legislatures, 29. In Texas, right? The Democrats have this pipe dream every year of trying to win Texas. The Democrats were trying to pick up 9. They needed 9 House seats to win the majority in Texas. And they didn't get any. They didn't get any. Governor races. Republicans won 8. Democrats won 3. Republicans picked up the governor's seat in Montana from a Democrat. So right now, Republicans have 27 governors and Democrats have 23. Makes sense? So these are crushing victories by the Republican, literally in everything, like every aspect. There's nothing that the Democrats won. And it wasn't even close. And that's why, again, there's this civil war inside the Democratic Party. Blue wave, there was no blue wave. They got crushed across the board. The best the Democrats can brag about is that they won a majority of the Michigan Supreme Court, and they stopped Republicans in Wisconsin from getting a veto-proof majority in their state houses. Those were the Democrat down-ticket victories, right? They're like, oh, yay, we have the Michigan Supreme Court barely, and at least those Republicans don't have a veto-proof majority in Wisconsin. That's all they got. Republicans are in a strong position right now. There's an argument to be made, and I would make it, that if you had to choose, now obviously you want everything, right? But if you had to choose between these two positions, you would take the Republican one, hands down. And I think the Democrats would too. On top of all that, never forget, I don't care what legacy the left writes about Donald Trump, never forget what Donald Trump was able to do with the Supreme Court. So Republicans have a lot to celebrate for 2020. At best for the Democrats, there's gridlock in D.C., which I think is a good thing. And assuming Biden wins the presidency, because Kamala is the least likable person ever, I think things look pretty good for Republicans in 2024. So we're going to talk about some more victories coming up here that I missed. And the big question is why? Why do Republicans win by so much? And why did the Democrats lose by so much? And then what can Republicans do for the knockout punch in 2022? That's all coming up on our special today. Before we get to that, though, you got to protect your home. This is such a shady, underhanded crime because you never know what's happening. And it's a ton of money. Home title theft. So I was just thinking, if you get pickpocketed, have you ever been pickpocketed? I got pickpocketed once. It was so annoying. Because you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that's what it was. I thought I felt something, all right? But what's the worst thing? What do you got, $50 in your wallet or whatever? This is shady. You have no idea it happened. And it's a ton of money. It's called home title theft. So the title of your home is under the lock and key of your county clerk, right? I don't know, like the crack security team at your county clerk's office. So someone hacks in easily, takes your home title, they forge your signature, they just trace it, and they get a quit claim deed. And then they take out loans against your home until all your equity's gone. And you have no idea this is happening and no one's gonna tell you because the county clerk's office thinks it's you doing it. So they're not, right? And by the time you notice, and the only time you notice is when you get collection notices in the mail, that thief is long gone. You're not protected by insurance, you're not protected by the bank, normal identity theft doesn't monitor this. And the county's not gonna help you. Home title lock, that's what protects you. They monitor your home title. So if anyone does anything to it, home title lock alerts you right away and you put the kibosh on it and that's it. Now, you may have to go to court still, and home title lock will spend up to $250,000 in legal fees so you can get your title back. It's a part of owning a house. This is part of the deal. HomeTitleLock.com. You can register your address and see if you're already a victim and use the promo code RADIO and you get 30 days free of protection. So RADIO on the website, HomeTitleLock.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special 2020, The Red Wave. I want to go to Amanda Mackey. She's usually a Republican strategist attorney, usually in Florida, but right now is in Wisconsin helping out with the recount effort. Amanda, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad you're here. Yeah, so we just did our opening segment about just the crushing victories across the board from Republicans and presidential race notwithstanding at the moment. But how do we make sense of this, right? What happened? What's the postmortem on it for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, as a woman and as a former congressional candidate myself, I couldn't be more proud of really the accomplishments that the GOP had this year down ballot with the House races. Just a historic number of women will be serving in Congress this year for the GOP, which is fantastic. 17 women in the 117th Congress in the GOP. So that's exciting. But really, their backgrounds are so exciting. You know, you have the first Iranian American, Stephanie Bice out of Oklahoma, the first female Citadel grad, Nancy Mace out of South Carolina, two South Korean-born congresswomen in California. So very exciting. But to get to your point, how did we have down ballot wins and so many victories throughout the country, really widespread? And then at the top of the ticket, obviously a very, very close election. I still say this is a very close election. I know the Electoral College numbers may bear out different, but if you look at the percentages, it is really a small number. And being here in Wisconsin, going through the recount effort as a lawyer here, it's still very slim. It's very slim across the board in all the battleground states. And so I really look at this as just an unconventional year of presidential elections. In my lifetime, I've never seen a year where you don't hear a speech or you don't hear discussions or debate on foreign policy, for example, something that is really important. And I actually think would have very much highlighted all the good that President Trump has done. Really historic Abraham Accords in the Middle East, peace like we've never seen, with countries coming together like United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Israel. Those types of things we just haven't seen in a very long time. And President Trump wasn't really able to talk about it. I think it became a referendum on COVID and whether you wear a mask or you don't wear a mask. And that's how people's votes came down.
Wow, that's so, I don't want to spend too much time thinking about this, and I've spent too much, but if there was no COVID, Trump,
Landslide.
I think, and who knows, right?
Landslide.
Because the stock market would have been at 30,000 like it was the other day, and Biden wouldn't have had any rallies at all. No one would have gone to his rallies, and it just would have been so obvious. And there wouldn't have been 3 million absentee ballots in Pennsylvania as opposed to the normal, 250,000, right? So it would have been a totally different world at the top of the ticket.
And we wouldn't have had the United States Postal Service as this, nucleus of the election, something we've really never had before. We wouldn't have had, well, let's be lax here in Pennsylvania, and kind of whenever the ballots come in after 3 days, regardless whether or not they're postmarked. Those are the types of things that change the outcome of an election, as slim as they may be, which is really what happened this year.
Yeah, gosh. But then also, you're right, on even just the policy-wise, just a referendum on COVID itself. Even though when Trump said months ago that we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year, the media laughed and ridiculed and mocked him. And even at the debate, Biden said we're not going to have a vaccine until late in next year. And here we are having one, any day now. We're going to have a vaccine. People are taking it. So
this is nothing short of, Nobel Peace Prize winning. What we were able to do with Operation Warp Speed, bringing a drug to market, a vaccine to market that quick. If you know anything about the pharmaceutical industry, it doesn't happen that quickly. That's just the ingenuity. And I really think the CEO of this country, a former CEO himself, the president, pushing every lever of government to make sure that we got a vaccine. And we did. Proof positive.
Yeah, he'll never get credit for anything he did. Let's talk about issues. So moving forward, we talked about the state legislatures and how they're going to redraw the districts, and that's going to benefit Republicans moving forward for 2022 and all that. And certainly 2024, when Kamala Harris runs for re-election. She's the least likable person ever, and I think Republicans have a good chance there. But issue-wise, what look to be winning issues for Republicans that we need to double down on, and other changes you think we need to make moving forward?
So the state legislatures, it's really an incredible phenomenon I don't think we've talked enough about in the media. So why is this important? Forward Majority, Democrat PAC, spent $12 million in the state of Florida, $10 million in the state of Texas to flip seats, flip legislatures, and ultimately redraw districts. And they failed. They failed so badly. They didn't flip a single seat. They didn't flip a single legislature. In fact, the GOP flipped both the House and the Senate in New Hampshire and in the state of Alaska. So this money that they spent, no amount of money, outspending the Republicans won't win you what they attempted to do, which was be able to redraw lines. But the issues are really what's key. And like I said, no amount of money is going to get you there when you're wrong on the issues. One thing we learned 3 Tuesdays ago was that this country is a center-right country. You cannot ignore that. It absolutely is. And so when Democrats are talking about defunding the police, when they're talking about writing off forgiving student loans as if it's punishment to pay back money that you chose to borrow. When they're talking about Green New Deal and packing the courts because they didn't get their way, this is un-American. All of these philosophies are un-American. And I think that's where you saw the great divide. And we talked in the beginning about down ballot, what happened and what happened at the top of the ticket. That's what it is about. It's about the issues, and the Democrats are wrong on the issues. They know that defunding is killing them. They know that being a socialist is wrong. And that's why you heard that conversation that Nancy Pelosi was on right after the election, and members of Congress from the Democratic Party saying, we cannot talk about socialism. It will kill us in the next election. It nearly killed me in this one.
I want to talk about that, but just such an interesting point. It's an interesting phenomenon that when it comes to local races, people seem to vote more on issues and tend to be more conservative. When it comes to the presidential race, it's just like, who knows? Like, it's just like, who do I like? Who would I want to have a beer with? Who, like you said, referendum on COVID or other like silly issues that are dictated by the media, as opposed to local issues, which are dictated more by, seems like rational thought, but I don't know. That's an interesting thing to study more. Do you have a thought on that?
What happened in 2000? Did you want to drink a beer with George Bush, or did you want to drink a beer with Al Gore? I think people do think about that on the high level, on the presidential stage, but when they're talking about their congressmen, generally speaking. They see them more, they interact with them more. They call their office. They're their first line into the government. You call your congressman and ask him or her for help or whatever it may be. So I think that there's a little bit more of a direct relationship as opposed to, well, do I want to see this guy's face on TV every night or this girl's face on TV every night as my president? So along with everything else we talked about.
And therefore, I would say that's a better reflection of what this country really is when you look at the local races, as you said. So let's talk about that civil war in the Democratic Party. Who's going to win this? And I guess there's two different ways to look at it. You have the congressional Democrats, and then if John Kerry ends up being president, John Kerry's the climate czar now. If Biden ends up being president, and who he's going to put in power. So is the woke left going to win, or is it going to be more centrist, old school progressives or liberals?
Well, take it straight from, Kate Bedingfield, his deputy campaign manager. She said, we are going to run a very aggressive, progressive agenda. And the vice president said, Joe Biden said, the progressives will be very, happy with who we pick and what we do. So I am under no illusions that they are going to move to the moderate base of the party. The progressive base is very strong. It's very active. And I believe that, just listening to Jim Clyburn yesterday, certainly not a progressive, say, there needs to be a place for Bernie Sanders in this administration. Wow. Should there be a Joe Biden administration? Is really, it tells you everything. They are pushing for the progressive base to be more a part of the Joe Biden administration. And I don't think that you can ignore that. And that's very scary for Americans. It's going to cost them dearly in 2022 and in 2024, I believe.
Yeah, I'm torn. I don't want them to do that because it's terrible for our country. But I almost kind of do want them to do that because they're going to get crushed again in any even remotely centrist district, right? So what? How do we interpret that?
Well, here's what people need to know. The Georgia Senate races is the only stopgap measure we may have. And so we've got to keep those two Senate seats because the tie-breaking vote, should the Democrats have 50, is the most liberal United States senator in America, Kamala Harris, the president of the Senate. She will be the tie-breaking vote on every major piece of legislation that can affect you and your families. Yeah, we're going to be hearing about Georgia, that's for sure. Give us a last thought on Florida and how Florida wasn't even close, right? I mean, no one's even talking about recounts in Florida or anything. Is Florida going to no longer be a swing state, or do you think this was kind of a one-off Republican win? I think we can give up on Florida being a battleground. Look, wow. 2016, 2018, 2020. It's been consistent. Yeah. Even 2014, Rick Scott was chosen governor. 2016, 2018, 2020. That's pretty consecutive wins back-to-back for Republicans. The state legislature had major victories, even in our liberal areas. We picked up 2 seats in the state of Florida. We beat the Clinton machine with Donna Shalala, former HHS secretary under Bill Clinton and current congresswoman from the Miami-Dade area, who was also the president of the University of Miami. Those things just don't happen by luck. They happen because Florida is moving way farther to the right than before. Wow, that's amazing. Amanda Mackey, you can follow on Twitter, Amanda, M-A-K-K-I. Amanda, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. Got some great insight there about Florida. Want to come back and get some insight in some of the California races. And there was no blue wave, even in crazy, ridiculous California. We'll talk about the minority wins for the Republicans as well. It's coming up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Before we get to that, I want to talk about the price of the dollar. The stock market is great, and I hope it keeps going higher. It won't, right? The stock market is very emotional, right? Focus on the value of the dollar. We have trillions of dollars of spending. By the way, Trump was no pauper when it came to spending, right? So we have record spending, more coming, more money being printed. Worldwide, there's all this talk of the global reset. Like, what? This is just the left's excuse to push in bigger government and more spending. I mentioned John Kerry by accident, but John Kerry, Joe Biden, they're like the same person. The climate czar, I mean, what do you think that's going to? It's just more money.
the value of the dollar is going to go, it is going down, and it will continue to go down, and inflation will skyrocket, and then when that happens, the price of gold goes up. So it's very simple. If you think that the foundation of our country, the economic foundation of our country is great, then maybe gold isn't right for you. If you think we're doomed, or at least headed in an unstable direction, you can shore up your foundations with gold. I bought gold and silver. Silver actually has a direct connection with increased production of solar panels. 6% of the price of a solar panel is silver, the price of silver. 20 grams of silver in each solar panel. Anyway, any questions you have, Patriot Gold Group. These guys are the best. They're not the fifth best. They're not near the top. They're not among the top. They're standalone the best. 5-star Consumer Affairs, 4 years in a row. A+ Better Business Bureau. AAA Business Consumer Alliance. No fees for life IRAs. Any questions? Patriot Gold Group. 1-800-798-4260. 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, want to continue our conversation about the red wave, truly, right? We're putting listen, national media only talks about the presidential race. So we're going to put that aside for a couple minutes here and talk about every other race that happened a couple weeks ago. And Republicans won across the board. It wasn't even close. Talk with Kira Davis. She's the editor-at-large at Wonderful Red State. Kira, how are you?
Hi, Mike. Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Good to talk to you. So we're both here in California. So let's take a minute or so to talk about crazy California and some wins even here for the Republican Party. What happened?
Yeah, we flipped a few seats. And well, I know that for a lot of us Californians, it's not necessarily the assembly seats that are a big deal during election time, although they do matter. What surprised me the most, which I can't stop talking about, is the propositions that we passed, and I could not believe that Californians turned down some of these very liberal propositions. I think that combined with some very important wins in the assembly shows me that California might be going in a different direction. One prop that I totally expected to pass that did not pass was that discrimination prop. We had a prop, for your viewers who might not know, we actually tried to eliminate equal protection this election cycle in California. We actually tried to make discrimination legal. And miraculously, California voters turned that down. That tells me that there were to my mind, a lot of Republicans that went to the ballot box this year in California that might not have in the past.
Yeah, there was also amazingly one, maybe even two, if I remember, tax increases that California's voted out. I've never seen that. I've never seen them turn down tax increases, which is amazing. So yeah, let's take some wins there. What do you make of the whole thing, right? The fact that Republicans won so many of these down ticket races by so much, like it wasn't even close. Is that because they more support conservatism, or do you think it was more a rebuke of the left?
I think it's a rebuke of the left. I think particularly Newsom, and not only some of the COVID stuff that's been going on, but also just some of the sneaky stuff that's been happening in Sacramento lately. For instance, again, going back to these props, Prop 22 was a big one. That's the Uber Lyft bill. And that was meant to relieve Uber and Lyft from this draconian new law, AB 5, which came along and killed independent contracting. Well, that killed Uber and Lyft, which is what it was meant to do. So Uber and Lyft had put this prop on to exempt themselves. It passed. I think that what we're seeing in regards to the races and also the propositions is a reaction to the overreach of Sacramento as led by Gavin Newsom. I just think this is the gig state. We're the state that invented the gig economy, and we just tried to kill it. Are you kidding me? Hollywood, the music industry. No, a lot of people, a lot of Democrats were already on their way to the polls to vote red just in protest. You add COVID restrictions onto that. Disneyland's closed. That killed Anaheim. 87% of Anaheim's jobs are connected to Disneyland. Closed.
Wow.
Restaurants, bars closed. Meanwhile, the governor's going out and doing whatever he wants with whoever he wants. Yeah, absolutely. People are reacting to that. I don't want to call it a red wave here in California because I think we both know better than to get our hopes too high for that in this state. But I will say I do see a shift happening. And the longer this COVID madness goes on with these unsubstantiated closures, the governor's just coming out, closing things willy-nilly, and then he shows up at the French Laundry for his $1,200 caviar dinner. It's just people can't take that kind of blatant hypocrisy. We'll put up with a lot here in California, but I do believe a lot of people drew a line this election cycle.
No, and it's in your face, all that hypocrisy. It's beyond hypocrisy. It's contempt. Let's talk nationwide for a minute here. What do you make of your analysis of the minority vote for Republicans, and how can, first of all, I hope it's the end of the black vote, the Muslim vote, the gay vote. Like, can we stop even having that conversation? Do you see cracks in that?
No, absolutely not. And frankly, but I'll be honest with you, I don't mind. I don't mind it. I think identity politics are fine if people are getting what they want. Because everybody has their interests. Every group has their interests. And this is one thing that Trump did that I don't think the GOP has learned to do yet. And hopefully they'll take some cues from Trump moving forward. And that is Trump saying, all right, it might sound cheesy to half y'all out there, but I'm going to go out and ask for the black vote. And I'm going to see what they want. Because you know what, Black Americans, we actually do have things that are personal to us in our community that we would like to see our politicians doing for the Black community. A lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of tension between the Black community and the illegal immigrant community. So immigration is important to us. These are things, education is a huge deal for Black parents. School choice is a huge deal for Black parents. These are things that matter to Black people. I don't think we should be dismissing them as kind of race politics or identity politics, because that doesn't get you anywhere. That's what Trump did. GOP wants to come along and say, or traditional GOP wants to come along and say, look, race doesn't matter. We're colorblind. It's the content of your character. These things are all true, of course, but that denies the reality of how we live, of the society we live in. And Donald Trump came along and said, I'm not going to ignore this reality. This is the way the world is, not the way I wish it could be. So Black folks, talk to me. Tell me what would move you. Tell me what, would move the needle for you. The GOP needs to get in there, not be afraid. I said this for years before Trump was even like a whisper on the scene, that politics goes to who shows up. And one of the biggest questions I get asked as a Black conservative is, Kira, why do Black people vote the way they vote? How do we change their vote? Well, guess what? The Democrats are there in the communities. They're not offering much. They're not that great, but they showed up. The GOP isn't even in the game. They're not even on the field. They haven't even left the locker room in some cases. And so I hope that after the Trump era is over, should it be next month or in 4 years, that the GOP will continue this trajectory with the minority community. And I think the first step to that is admitting that minority communities have different needs and desires than white communities, and that's okay. It's okay to go after that vote like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I understand that. Let me think about that. I think that makes sense. But let me push back a second.
Okay.
School choice. That's a universally beloved position for all people, right? So can a Republican candidate nationwide or whoever support school choice? And does it have to be like, oh, I'm going after the Black vote with this? Or is this just the principled and policy-wise best thing to do? How would you frame that if you were a candidate?
School choice is a great subject because it kind of ticks all the boxes. It's both. It's universal. It's good for everybody. But for Black people, school choices, I'll tell you, school choice is one of the issues that flipped me from liberal to conservative. It was like a huge deal in my ideological transformation because I was working within the education system. I was running an after school program. I was seeing how these policies that I had supported my whole life worked. It turns out they don't work. So school choice is really important to Black people, but because teachers unions have such a lock on public schools, it's a case of you've got to get into the communities and explain it to people. Because unions will explain it away. They'll just say, well, look, if you approve of school choice, you're going to pull money from the public school, and that scares us. But there's no, let's take Florida. Rick DeSantis won in Florida because of school choice, because of the minority vote. Went directly to minorities. Obviously, this is an issue that is good for everyone. School choice is better for everybody. But he knew that was an important issue for particularly in certain boroughs and counties in his state, that people wanted to be able to choose where their kids go to school. And that's what tipped him over to win the governorship. So is it a universal topic? Yes. And when you're, campaigning in rural Iowa where, the crowd's a little less diverse, there's no reason to label it as a, quote, Black issue. But if you're campaigning in downtown Philadelphia, absolutely label it a Black issue because it is. It can be both. There's nothing wrong with recognizing that certain policies might benefit certain communities or might excite certain communities.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, that's all right. I get that. I got about 30 seconds. Now, all that being said, are you surprised, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but are you surprised that Trump didn't even do more, get more of the Black vote because of the efforts he did take?
I believe he did. I never believed the statistics for Black vote anyway. You can't poll that correctly, because a lot of Black folks aren't going to tell you that they voted Republican. And it's the same reason why exit polls always suck, right? Because Republicans don't answer exit polls. So I believe it's higher. I have always believed. I believe the first time in 2016 it was higher. I believe, but even still, to have like 13 to 18% of a Black male vote, even that's a huge leap statistically for a GOP candidate, but I totally believe it's higher.
Makes sense. We got to keep driving it home, make it even more and more. Kira Davis, editor-at-large, Red State, real Kira Davis on the Twitter. Kira, appreciate you.
Bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Good to talk to you. Thanks. Oh, you too. I want to come back. Former Congressman Dennis Ross. We'll get his insight about the Nancy Pelosi. What's up next for her and the congressional Democrats in that civil war. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special 2020, The Red Wave. I want to go to a former congressman from Florida. He's now the director of the American Center for Political Leadership at Southeastern University, Dennis Ross. Mr. Ross, how are you, sir?
Very good, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, wonderful to talk to you. So just your overall assessment of what I think, we'll put the presidential race aside for a few minutes, just a massive red wave. What do you think of it?
It's phenomenal, and let me tell you why. We have probably the best farm league for Republicans than we've seen in a long time. 32 legislatures are Republican. In 2022, they are redrawing the lines both for the legislative and the congressional districts. You've seen an increase in minorities and Latinos vote Republican that came out and voted for this president. We build on that foundation. You will see, I think, a tremendous opportunity for Republicans and conservatives at all levels, including in Congress.
I love the term farm league. I've never thought of it like looking at the bench and literally the people, the candidates that are coming up, and comparing that with the Democratic candidates who are coming up. What do you see on both the farm leagues?
Okay, well, first of all, I see a lot more diversity ethnically, in gender. I see a lot more youth, which I think has been phenomenal. I see that the Democrats don't have the youth. They have a progressive wing that is taking them where they don't want to go. Look at Texas and Florida, for example. 30 years ago, Texas and Florida were blue states. They were Democrat, but they were a conservative, what we call Dixiecrats. And today, they're all Republican. In fact, they're stronger Republican than they've ever been as a result of this election. All this is moving in the right direction. We just have to maintain the harness of it and expand our base with it. And I think you'll see, with the right leadership, the White House will definitely be an opportunity in 4 years. And clearly, Congress, in my opinion, will go Republican in 2 years. It's a matter of hanging on to Georgia, in January, which I think will happen. The center of the political universe will be there in January. But
sure,
it's exciting. It's a very positive result when you look down ticket and long term for the Republican Party.
Yeah, 2024, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Like we're still, like we just got done with 20. But when you have Kamala Harris running, right? This is like the least likable person of all time. I don't know who the Republicans could put up, but I like the chances there. Now, which side would you rather be on right now, right? Would you rather have the White House or would you rather have everything else that the Republicans have?
When I look long term, I see where we are now to be better, and I'll tell you why. My experience in Congress has been that the majority has a hard time keeping their extremes in line, and Speaker Pelosi will have a very difficult time trying to get 218 votes to pass any of her agenda unless it goes incredibly left-wing. But then your moderate, what few blue dogs, if there are any left in Congress, will object to that. And then if you put in play a Republican Senate, we can pretty much make sure that tax policy isn't adversely impacted, that healthcare is not adversely impacted, that international relations can still show some strength from the United States, which has been built up over the last 4 years. So I would much rather be in our position because I think now we've got an opportunity to use our Farm League to build leadership, to give them the opportunity so leadership can rise to the occasion.
Yeah, gridlock is good. It's just a shame, and this is true for both sides, that the executive branch has so much power as it does, and I wish it didn't. But alas,
I agree.
And I don't know how that ever gets reined back in, quite frankly.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, no, the Congressional Review Act is something that we imposed 4 years ago when Trump won, because as Obama was leaving the administration, he imposed all these regulatory rules. And under the Congressional Review Act, we were able to snatch back a lot of those that were inhibiting business, inhibiting growth. So Congress does have that power, but Congress has got to come to the table and limit the power that the president has. It's an executive. It's not a lawmaking position.
Yeah, and I would take that as Republicans too. So give me some insight into Congress that we don't understand, right? Like some the ins and outs of Congress and forces at play that will be meaningful in the next 2 years that a normal citizen wouldn't understand.
Well, first of all, when you remain in the majority, even if it's a slight majority, those in the majority all want to take credit for it. So therefore, they think they can further their agenda, and their agenda is most likely not in concert with the leadership's agenda. And, Nancy deals with a very strong fist. I mean, she is an amazing fundraiser. She keeps people in line like nobody I've ever seen. But she's going to have her hands full from her left wing. The progressives are going to, especially if Biden puts Bernie Sanders in a cabinet position, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Speaker Pelosi to move Congress to the left, and it's just not going to happen. She's going to deal more with infighting in her own party than she will in dealing with Kevin McCarthy, who's the minority leader in the House. Many members are going to look at what's going to happen in 2 years and start preparing for that. So, this is no cakewalk. In fact, I would much rather be in the Republicans' position today in the House than the Democrat position. Again, we narrowed the majority's rule. We built diversity within our ranks with the election results, and we have the momentum behind us. Clearly, in my mind, I don't see how, unless some really bizarre event occurs, that the Republicans do not take the House again in 2 years.
Yeah, gosh, that's great. Yeah, I'm so encouraged. And that was the point of this special today, is we wanted people to be encouraged over Christmas break here about the future. Can you talk about Nancy Pelosi for a minute? I don't understand it. I don't understand the force of her. She's 80 years old. She seems, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to look like objectively, like she seems like incompetent, or I don't even know. I don't know, but like she must be sharp as a tack. Or there must be something going on behind the scenes that keeps her in power.
I'll tell you, my experience, and I don't want to demean those of us that serve.
That's not my point. Yep.
No, I know that, but I'm going to use me as an example. I am a result of my staff. And if I have a great staff, I'm a great congressman. She has surrounded herself with people who have built a machine for her that predominantly relies on a network of fundraising that can help other candidates get elected that then have an obligation to her. It's not so much about her ability to formulate and implement policy as it is her ability to harness and bring together enough votes to keep her in power. I mean, let's face it, in 2010, our mantra was fire Pelosi. We accomplished that. 8 years later, she's back in charge. She was rehired. That's amazing. You know, and it's not, I will not take away from her. You know, she stood on the House floor a couple years ago for 7.5 hours in her magic minute that we give to leadership, and high heels and pontificated for forever. I mean, she has some resiliency and some persistence, but substantively, I think it's more about her network of people that keep her in power than it is about any particular agenda that she is personally promoting.
Yes, interesting. Okay, so when I think of her and people like that in DC, I think of like House of Cards, right? So like they're deeply, I don't know, they're like shrewd and all. Is it more like a brilliant shrewdness, or you're saying it's more just like, no, she just is an amazing fundraiser for people and they're beholden to her? Or are those maybe kind of the same thing? But yeah,
it's a little bit of both, Mike, because fundraising is very, very important because a lot of members want to stay elected. But it's also making the issue of the day the most important issue of their life. And a lot of members fall into that trap and they don't realize that tomorrow's another issue that could be just as important. And so they take the bait and, you know, they're afraid to survive a negative vote, if you will, because of this. They go against the speaker, they go against leadership. I mean, I've been there many times, but you find out that tomorrow they need you again. And so they're always going to keep you at the table. It's just that once they they sign your dance card, then you go sit down.
Wow, man, so interesting. All right, Congressman, we got to run, but real quick. Number one issue that Republicans need to drive home for the next election.
Again, it's the economy. Coming out of this COVID pandemic, we've got to rebuild our economy. The Republicans know how to do it. We did it with tax incentives. We did it with international trade. We were able to establish ourselves so much stronger in the world economy. If we stay focused on the economy, if we make sure that these people, as they survive and get out of this pandemic, will have better lives, we will have a much better election in 2022 and 2024.
Former Congressman Dennis Ross at Southeastern University. Thanks, Congressman. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. All right, listen, everyone. I hope you're encouraged, right? I hope you're feeling good. Like, I excuse the analogy, but like I'm thinking like battle lines are being drawn, and yeah, you want to win everything, right? But I think we're positioned here. We don't have the House, but I think we're positioned right where we want to be. We kind of let them do their infighting. We got the Senate. We got gridlock all around. Yes, of course, you want the White House, but look who they got coming up the ranks. Kamala Harris is going to be their next VP. We got way more people ready to go against her in the 2024 election that I think will launch us in a much better place for a longer period of time. I'm feeling very good about where we are as conservatives politically. Culturally, that's a different question. That's what we focus on a ton of our show as well. But alas, hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. You can use all that perspective against your gloating family member over the break here. We'll be back. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.